Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14, presented by Bearded Iris. We are here to preview Tennessee's matchup with Florida Atlantic in the Sweet 16. That one will be in New York at 8 Central. We'll be watching that on TBS. Tennessee is about a 6.8-point favorite, according to the predictive computers. That is an average of Ken Pomeroy, Bart Torvik, ESPN's BPI, and Jeff Sagarin. But, Blake, the computer's all over the place on this. Ken Pomeroy has the Vols as a 4-point favorite. BPI has Tennessee by 10.2. That's a massive range at this point of the season. Those computers, minus Sagarin, which does not give victory probabilities, have Tennessee as a 74% favorite to win this game. Blake, it wasn't the prettiest game stylistically in the NCAA tournament, but the Vols looked awfully good in beating Duke. Florida Atlantic got a bit of a break when it drew Fairleigh Dickinson rather than Purdue in its game to win to get here, but Fairleigh Dickinson gave Florida Atlantic all it wanted towards the end. FAU, one of the nation's best mid-major teams. Tennessee, a team that had a little bit of a disappointing regular season, but the computers have loved the Vols all year. And look, the computers are right. They had Tennessee as a Sweet 16 worthy team. And here Tennessee is in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I don't think we ever doubted they could get there. It was just you just didn't know. Your confidence in that was lower than it would have been, a while back. And so I don't think it was just. I think we knew they could get to this spot. It was just, were they going to put it all together to actually do it was the bigger question. And obviously the Ziegler injury was significant. And we talked about the Duke matchup. Just felt like it, on paper, wasn't a great matchup. But ultimately, what won out in that game was Tennessee's physicality, and I think that could ultimately be what winds up winning out in this game. Now, on Florida Atlantic side, for anyone out there, Tennessee fan or otherwise, who thinks that this Florida Atlantic team has just gotten here by luck and a good draw, sure, that's helped. You got to have both of those to make a run in March always. But it's a good team. Like, they have 33 wins. Let's not act like they have 33 wins and pick the lowest conference in the country. The Conference
It's
USA.
hard to do in any league.
Well, yeah, Conference USA is not what it used to be, but that's still, there's some good teams. UAB still playing as of this recording.
Texas is good. Yeah.
Yeah, all those teams have won games, right? North Texas is playing tonight as we record this on Tuesday. So that wound up being a league where there's some good teams there. And so I don't think, and I know Tennessee won't do this, but you cannot overlook this Florida Atlantic team because Dusty May's done a really good job. And they are a team, I think, that will give Tennessee probably some fits in a couple of areas, just looking at, how they play. And like we always say, we like teams that are very well-rounded, don't have any obvious weaknesses. I don't know that this team really doesn't have. I mean, they're not, I guess what, Chris, probably just from a size standpoint, they're not going to probably be able to match Tennessee's size position for position, but otherwise they do a lot of things well. And so it does make for an intriguing setup here, because I don't think anyone should go in kind of undervaluing the Owls and this opportunity for them. So,
okay, let's talk about Tennessee here for a minute. And some of this will be repetitive to people who have watched our channel before, but I don't presume that everybody has watched this before. And if you're watching and wanting insight on this game, I think this is a key thing to bring up. Much has been made of Tennessee's Zakai Ziegler injury, and rightfully so. He was the engine that I think made that team go. He was arguably Tennessee's best defender. He was absolutely Tennessee's best point guard and ball handler. But the thing that we pointed out all season is Tennessee had a lot of injuries to a lot of kids. Santiago Vescovi played with a shoulder ailment, missed some time, probably was hobbled at other points. He's a kid who, again, is not Tennessee's best point guard option, but he is an option, and he played pretty well against Duke. Had one turnover in 38 minutes. So that's something you like to see if you're Tennessee. Josiah Jordan-James and Julian Phillips. Josiah Jordan-James, probably the guy that would have led their team in minutes, perhaps, had he been healthy all season, or he would have been close. He missed half the season. He's playing well. He is just a glue guy for that team. That might be underestimating it in some ways, but he does a lot of things well, is I guess what I'm getting at. Yeah, Julian Phillips, who is a McDonald's All-American, who's come up big for them at times. Both those kids missed a lot of time in the SEC. Those guys are now back and healthy. So when you factor in Tennessee doesn't have Ziegler, that's something to consider, but you also need to factor in that the Vols got some guys back that didn't play for portions of the season, and sometimes Tennessee struggled without those guys.
I mean, they still got depth. They don't lack depth at all. Because it's like Conwell can step up and score 27 points like he did against Duke. He can step up and be the difference maker. James can be the difference maker. I think Meshack overall plays some pretty good basketball.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to score. He doesn't have to score 15 points a game. He just has to, as a point guard type scenario, the defense. I mean, this is what Tennessee's built on. It's built on defense. And guess what, Chris? Everybody on the roster can defend. And
did anybody make a big deal about that on Saturday?
I don't know.
Were there any comments in studios or on Twitter?
You may have seen some people talking about Tennessee's defensive style. I've got my own opinions on that. You want to hear what they are? Guess what? I get people get frustrated by it and they'll say this or that, but here's the way I see it, Chris. I've always been a fan of if you don't want to have physical contact, don't play basketball. Because I don't have an issue with the way Tennessee plays. I don't. Some people do. I don't. Because ultimately, you are supposed to do what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to put your team in the best position to win games. And in this era, I think there are things that frustrate basketball players. What is that, Chris? It's just
contact would be one.
Pressure, defense. I mean, so why wouldn't you game plan for that? Why would you not make that your approach? Is now look, are they, I know everyone picks on plastics and all this stuff. I get it. Like I understand. I mean, you will know he's there if you're playing against him. There's zero doubt about that. But overall, I don't have an issue with the way Tennessee plays because I look at this team. You're supposed to be physical. You're supposed to make it as hard as you can for the other team to score. And that's exactly what they do. And so is it their fault if the referees don't call something where they get a little too physical? Not Tennessee's fault. So I don't have an issue with it. I mean, it's not like they're out there throwing haymakers, right? They start doing that, I got an issue. But for the most part, I don't think I've seen a lot of those. I mean, Duke got bloodied a bit in that game, but I didn't see any, closed fist punches or anything of that nature. But that's just what you expect, right? And I think that's what we talk about, like just the depth of this roster. Everybody there is fully on board to defend the way they have to defend to win games because their strength is not consistent offense. It is to bang around, be physical, get offensive rebounds, make things as hard as humanly possible on the other team, and don't give up anything easy. And why should we be upset about that approach? Right?
Well, I mean, if it's called one way, then the other team is allowed to play that way too. But
sure.
Good point on Meshack. I mean, he has played a good bit of the point minutes for them too. I didn't mean to imply that it's all Vescovy, but let's talk about Florida Atlantic. Jonell Davis led them in scoring. They play about 9 guys deep. I mean, this is a team that's got some depth. What you're going to need against Tennessee is a really good 3-point shooting team, 37% from the season. It's a okay foul shooting team, 72%, but the guards, Davis and Martin, shoot it at 85 and 79% from the line. So presumably those would be the guys whose hands you want the ball to be in. You mentioned 33-3 or 32-3, I guess. What
33.
presents a challenge? Yeah, okay. Sorry, the stat sheet that the school generated has not updated through that. But in any case, won a lot of games. What challenges do the Owls present Tennessee?
Well, I mean, it's the 3-point shooting, I think, is priority number one. I mean, I think they rank 12th in the country in 3-pointers per game. They make about 9.7 a game. just for reference, Alabama makes 10.1, and they're ninth in the country. If you want kind of a comparison there, but so I mean, you've got a dangerous team because of their ability to go off and make threes, and I think that's always, as we always say, it's a win and go home, win or go home scenario, right? So it's that's always dangerous in a one game series playoff scenario. Like it's always dangerous because the team can get hot, and then it's just then you're taking Tennessee out of their game, right? If they do that, but you know, you can also look at that and look at maybe like the past 5 games, right? Western Kentucky, they went 5 of 26 from three. MTSU 6 of 17, UAB 7 of 20, Memphis 8 of 28, Fairleigh Dickinson 9 of 31. So that necessarily shot it as great in the past 5 games, but they do have that ability to go off. I think I was looking up the number. I'm trying to see what it is. I want to say it's like, I don't know, maybe close to 15, at least 15 times. I think this season they've hit double digits in threes. So they're going to attempt some threes. And I think that's where Tennessee, as we've seen, Chris, I think let's think back to that Alabama game in Knoxville. What was the thing that stood out to most? Alabama had to start their offense so far away from the basket, like, feet beyond the 3-point line, because Tennessee will push you out that way and they will make you, they're not just going to let you dictate what you want to do and start your offense, right on the 3-point line. And then we'll do what we need to know. That they're going to push you further away to try to make it much harder to get any sort of flow going whatsoever. And so, will Florida Atlantic get those 3-point looks against Tennessee? It will be tough because they are the top 3-point field goal defense team in the country, 26.4%. Now, as we always say, I think you have to keep numbers in context in the SEC because there weren't a lot of great shooting teams in the league, and Tennessee could just completely shut down some of those teams. And those teams have poor percentages because, they just couldn't shoot. But at the same time, it also factored into the way Tennessee can play on defense, and they had something to do with those numbers. So I think that is probably the most glaring thing is just if Tennessee defends the way that they usually do, I think it'll be harder for Florida Atlantic to get those looks. But to repeat what I said, it's a one game series. And if a team comes out making shots, you give them a little confidence, they get hot. That's where I think Florida Atlantic can give them, the most issues because, as we always say, I think there are certain teams that play well in kind of a catch up type manner. We don't always know if Tennessee is going to shoot the ball well. So I don't know that if I were Tennessee, I'd want to, get down double digits here or something early and have to play from behind and maybe force some things offensively because I don't think that plays into Tennessee's favor at all.
Okay, I'm listening to you talk about FAU, and of course, we watched Tennessee play. I don't even know how many games this year. Been a lot, most of them probably. It's not an exact comparison, but one team that gave Tennessee some issues was Missouri.
Yeah.
Now, Missouri plays a little faster, but both teams shoot pretty well. Missouri forced more turnovers on the defensive end, although it was a pretty bad defensive team. That's really not what Florida Atlantic is. They just limit your shooting and your rebounding more so than forced turnovers where they're just average. Do you see any similarities between Florida Atlantic and Missouri?
Well, I mean, I think just in the sense of quick scoring spurts, yes. Like I think you can find comparisons there because of how the two teams shoot the ball. And but like you said, I think the other thing is Missouri could get probably more of those opportunities because of how they force turnovers. So they could get probably some easier looks because, right, you could get a steal on the left wing, and maybe it's just you're forcing Tennessee to rotate differently on the way down, and you get the ball down quick, and you get an open three somewhere, or you get kind of that break somewhere. I mean, Florida Atlantic, you said they don't really turn people over a ton, so I think it's a little different in that regard. But like, there are similarities because of the 3-point distribution in terms of the points, like where they get their points from. I mean, they're a team, as we said. If you look at how Florida Atlantic usually gets, they're going to make jump shots, and I think that's for Tennessee. Sometimes again that can be a good thing. Sometimes it can be a bad thing if the other team gets hot, and that's where like a Missouri, they got the bulk of their points from three, right? But again, I think a part of that was just the fact that they were able to get better looks that weren't necessarily having to just set up in the half court and try to beat Tennessee, right? For Missouri, it was Des Hodge gets a steal, push it out, guys are running on each side, and you throw it in the corner, and all of a sudden, Golson's open for three or something. Like, I think, are we going to see that same setup here for Florida Atlantic? I think, they'd certainly be wise to entertain that option, but I just think that was probably what a more Missouri could do versus a different matchup here against Florida Atlantic that, both, I mean, Florida Atlantic can get up and down the floor too, right? Like they have no problem getting up and down the floor in terms of running in that way. And I think that's a recipe for success here because like we just said, Chris, if we're going to talk about this in Alabama, San Diego State, if you get in the half court and you just try to straight up beat Tennessee just in the half court, I mean, how hard was that for Duke, right? How hard was that for teams to get any sort of kind of momentum against Tennessee this season in doing that? And I just think that's going to be it for Florida Atlantic. That's maybe one thing they can lean on is to say, hey, we need to, get out and get going because if we have to sit up in the half court, we know Tennessee is going to push us away from where we want to be offensively. So,
Yeah, I'm looking at the 3 games the Owls lost, and one was to Ole Miss, which can defend, and Ole Miss was healthier back when it won that game back on November the 11th. That was FAU's second game of the year. That was in Oxford. And again, Ole Miss ended the season a much different team than it was then. February the 2nd to UAB, which is ranked 64th in adjusted defensive efficiency. And then February 16th at Middle Tennessee State, not too far from us. MTSU kind of unremarkable at everything. That was just a game on the road, and sometimes you lose those. So I guess you can say in 2 of the 3 games that the Owls played that they lost, they ran into really good defensive teams. So I guess if you're Tennessee, that makes you feel it better. Just not a lot of great points of comparison, though. I'm going to go with Tennessee in this one. The predictive computers have done a pretty good job in telling us who deserved to be at this stage. We have kind of made fun of the predictive computers all year where they've had the Vols, but Tennessee back number 1 in the country again in adjusted defensive efficiency. The Vols hit just enough shots, and I know that comes and goes. And if Tennessee loses, it's probably going to be the same thing we've talked about all year where they just couldn't hit shots. But I liked what Olivia Kamwa gave them. Vescovi's able to give them that. I think Tennessee's got just enough to win this one, Blake.
yeah, I'm picking Tennessee too. I think this is, I think on paper, this does not seem like the worst matchup because of what I said. I mean, they defend well. Florida Atlantic is going to need to hit some threes. And if the shots just aren't falling, you could definitely see Tennessee grinding their way to a 12 to 15 point win here. Like, I really think that's possible. But at the same time, the shots are falling. You just said it. If Florida Atlantic's coming out making shots, if Tennessee's not, maybe defending as well on the perimeter, or they are able to get out and run a little bit and get some kind of easy transition threes or something for Florida Atlantic, then all bets are off because it's just a matter of can Tennessee score efficiently enough to keep up. And I think that's always going to be a question. So you're always playing a guessing game for me there, but I don't hate this matchup for Tennessee at all. I just like the Duke matchup worse, which makes sense because I mean I guess if you're just looking at it from a seeding standpoint, but also don't discount I think what Dusty May has done this season, and he'll have his team ready to go. This is again a really good team. I just think there are some things. It's always the hesitation. Just you never know, as we said, when you're a 6-minute scoreless stretch away from Tennessee. Doing that. And I think that's always my hesitation. But I just think the physicality, Chris, is what wins out here. As we said, I think just teams having to adjust to how Tennessee plays. It's not easy to do. And we've already seen that, for a top 5 seed in Duke. I think it's one thing to see it, watch it. It's another thing to actually play it for 40 minutes. And I just think that's probably what wins out here.
SEC teams were kind of used to it, but teams that aren't playing the Vols a time or two a year may not be as much. So that I think you bring up a fair point there. And back to close the circle on predictive computers, Florida Atlantic was a team that predictives loved all year. Sagarin's got FAU number 22. I think Bart Torvik's got the Owls in that range too. So when we talk about predictive computers doing a good job at telling us who would get here. It wasn't just with Tennessee. It also happened with FAU as well, which, of course, the Owls helped by that Fairleigh Dickinson upset of Purdue. But in any case, Blake, any parting thoughts on the matchup before we go?
No, I think it should be, again, I just think it's, Tennessee, I feel like the setup is there. They just got to play their game, and if they do that, I think they'll be okay. But as I mentioned, I wouldn't look at Florida Atlantic as just a Conference USA team. Like they are really good. They have 33 wins for a reason. Dusty May does a great job there. He will have I think his opportunities at a higher level soon enough. But a very well-rounded team. I just think Tennessee is so good defensively that you could put them against anybody out there right now and feel like they've got a shot, just based on how teams are struggling to adjust to them. And we've seen that in their first two NCAA tournament games. So,
okay, thank you for watching our NCAA tournament preview of Tennessee and Florida Atlantic. We will recap this one when it is done. Best way to get that, hit the notifications button, or rather the subscribe button, which gets you notified if you hit the like button. If you did like this video, hit that too. That helps us out. We will also be previewing every single game involving SEC teams in the NCAA tournament and also talking some baseball. We're slowly getting into that as our attention starts to shift to the baseball side of things too. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, Bearded Iris. He is Blake Lovell. I am Chris Lee, and we will see you again soon at Southeastern 14.